Why was the jungle so quiet, right before men started dying? Lieutenant Jake Morrison's voice broke through the static. "Where's the shooter?" The comms hissed with panic, rare for a SEAL team. But panic was all that was left when invisible death began cutting them down, one by one. The air was thick with heat, gunpowder, and fear. Rachel Cooper pressed herself deeper into the mud 50 meters behind them, her so-called interpreter's uniform soaked through. Her heart beat steady, controlled. She'd been trained for chaos, just not this kind of cruelty. Another round split the air. One of the operators, Stevens, went down hard behind a fallen log, screaming for a medic. Morrison barked orders, but his voice was trembling. "Eyes on that shooter. Someone give me a damn position." No one answered, no one could. Because the shooter or shooters were ghosts. And Rachel, she was buried in that same mud, fingers brushing the hidden compartment of her pack. Inside it, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a truth none of them could imagine. A disassembled Remington 700 sniper rifle, her rifle. 2 weeks she'd carried it through hell, pretending it was camera gear. 2 weeks of humiliation, slurs, Barbie, princess liability, translator Barbie. 2 weeks of the kind of degradation only men who thought they were gods could invent. Now those same men were dying. She could have let them, every instinct said they deserved it, let them feel small, helpless, afraid, just like they'd made her feel. But Michael's face flashed through her mind, her fiancé, still somewhere in these same jungles, missing for 6 months. He'd been CIA, part of a 12-officer network that vanished during an op gone wrong. She was here to find him, and to find the one who sold him out. The jungle screamed with gunfire again, close, too close. Bark exploded over Morrison's head and his voice cracked. "We're pinned. I need that shooter found now." Rachel exhaled. The decision was already made. She rose from the mud like something pulled from another world. The Remington came together in her hands with the mechanical grace of muscle memory, barrel, bolt, stock, scope. In 30 seconds she was whole again. The ghost had returned. 2 weeks earlier, the C-130 had landed in the heart of Colombia, and the men of SEAL Team 8 had strutted down the ramp like conquering heroes. Rachel had stood on the tarmac, hidden behind aviator shades and a calm face. They didn't see her as one of them, that was the point. To them, she was just an interpreter, an assignment, background noise. "Who's the chick?" Petty Officer Brad Stevens had said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Specialist Cooper," Colonel Davidson replied curtly. "Interpreter, fluent in local dialects. CIA requested her for this operation." Morrison, tall, blue-eyed, and built like a linebacker, had looked her up and down. "I don't babysit Barbie dolls in combat zones," he'd said. Rachel had smiled faintly. "Good thing I don't need babysitting." He'd laughed, that kind of laugh that says you're not even worth insulting properly. That was day 0. Day 1 she tried to sit at their table in the mess hall. Stevens blocked her path with his plate piled high with eggs. "This table, for operators, princess. Translators sit over there." She'd smiled again, soft, harmless, the kind of smile that disarms. When he accidentally bumped her tray, spilling rice and beans across her boots, she'd crouch to clean it up, silently memorizing every detail about them while her face stayed lowered. Tank, the biggest of them all, had a limp on his right side, old injury. Stevens favored his left knee. Morrison touched his jaw whenever he was pleased with himself. Details, always details. That night she cataloged everything, every insult, every habit, every weakness. Because Ghost 7 never forgot. By day 3, they dumped her gear into the mud. By day 5, they locked her in a shipping container under the noon sun. "Time to toughen up, princess," Stevens had laughed. The metal burned her palms, the heat inside climbed past 120 degrees. She used breathing techniques learned during SEER training, slow the pulse, conserve oxygen, stay calm. For 6 hours she stayed there, her mind cataloging numbers, faces, patterns. She was supposed to be broken. Instead, she was planning. When they finally opened the door, she stumbled out playing the role. Weak, trembling, grateful for the air. Only one man had looked at her with any concern, Chief Petty Officer Vega. "You all right, Cooper?" She'd nodded, taking the water he offered. Behind him, the others had laughed. They didn't know the woman they were laughing at had 117 confirmed kills. That night, she injected the nerve blocker compound into her arm, a chemical crutch that steadied her hands during extreme stress. She didn't need it for shooting. She needed it to keep her rage from showing. Rage made people sloppy, and Rachel couldn't afford to be sloppy. Michael's photo lay on her cot, his smile frozen, his message scrawled on the back. 5 years since that first disaster of a date. Here to 50 more. She kissed it once before hiding it away. Then, quietly, she began assembling her rifle, blindfolded, piece by piece. Her fingers moved with the same muscle memory that made her one of the best shooters the ISA ever produced. Day 10, the briefing room. Colonel Davidson stood before the map, pointing at the ridge line overlooking the landing zone. Rachel saw it instantly, a perfect sniper's nest. "Sir," she'd said softly, "that ridge provides clear sight lines, if anyone's." Morrison slammed his hand on the table. Did someone ask for the translator's tactical opinion? The room fell silent. "I just thought." "You thought wrong. When we want language help, we'll ask." Stevens accidentally spilled his coffee on her, steaming liquid soaking through her shirt. She sat there, burning, humiliated, silent. Only Vega passed her a towel discreetly. She didn't even look up. She couldn't afford to. Because in that same moment she'd realized something worse. Davidson wasn't just arrogant. He was nervous, too nervous, checking his watch, his phone, watching the room too closely. Something about him didn't fit. Later that night, she reviewed intercepted communications. And the puzzle came together, the cartel ambushes, the vanished CIA officers, the insider knowledge. Davidson, it had to be. He'd sold them out, sold Michael out. She was going to prove it, even if it meant burning her cover. But for now, she had to keep pretending. The next morning, Morrison used her as a prop during combatives training. He threw her to the mat, driving his knee into her ribs. The others laughed. "You feel that," he said. "That's the real world, Cooper. That's where people like you die." She lay there gasping, her body screaming to respond, but she didn't. She couldn't. Because the mission wasn't to win. The mission was to wait. That night she wrote her report in code, encrypted through a camera memory card that looked empty to anyone else. "Davidson dirty," she typed. "Evidence building, awaiting confirmation." Day 14. The container again. Hotter, smaller, 6 hours of suffocating heat and darkness. By the time they opened it, her vision swam. But she'd learned something new before they locked her up. Intercepted radio chatter hinting that Michael and the other CIA officers were still alive, somewhere deep in the jungle. Hope was a dangerous thing. It kept you moving long after reason said stop. When she collapsed out of the container, Vega had been there again. He said nothing, just caught her arm before she hit the ground. There was something in his eyes, suspicion maybe, or understanding. Either way, he didn't stop her. And then came the morning of the ambush. Morrison had been cocky at breakfast, bumping her tray for old time's sake. "Oops," he said, grinning. She ignored him because something about the team's energy was off. They were prepping quietly. Tension, not arrogance. Something was coming. At 200 hours, they moved out. She wasn't supposed to follow, but she did, slipping into the night with her ghillie suit and her silent rage. Through the thermal scope, she saw it unfold. The SEALs walking straight into an ambush so precise it could only have been designed by someone who knew their playbook. In 10 minutes, 4 operators went down. And now Morrison was screaming for help he didn't deserve. Rachel's rifle assembled in seconds. Her pulse dropped to that steady sniper rhythm, 3 beats, 2, 1. Breath in, half exhale, hold. Through her scope she saw them, 5 Wagner shooters, professionals, hidden in the trees but not hidden enough. The first was 787 meters out behind a fallen trunk. The crosshair settled. The world narrowed to a single breath. The shot cracked like thunder. The man's skull burst in a bloom of red and glass. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece. Who's shooting? Who the hell? She was already chambering another round. Second target, 834 meters elevated, breathing steady, trigger slow. The round punched through his armor like paper. Third, moving left to right, 952 meters. Motion was death. Her shot hit mid-stride. Fourth, hidden behind foliage, only a sliver of shoulder visible. She threaded it through a gap no bigger than a dinner plate. One more body hit the dirt. The fifth tried to run, mistake. 900 meters flat, she didn't even need to adjust. 5 round, 43 seconds, silence. The jungle stopped breathing. She rose from the mud. The seals were shouting, disoriented, scanning for an unseen ally or enemy. Rachel slung her rifle, stepped through the smoke and emerged behind them. Morrison turned and froze. His weapon half raised, his brain still catching up. Cooper. Her voice was calm, controlled. Specialist Rachel Cooper, Intelligence Support Activity, call sign Ghost 7. The others stared as if seeing her for the first time. Yes, she added quietly, I've been operational this whole time. She looked Morrison in the eye, the man who'd mocked her, shoved her, broken her ribs for sport. You spent 2 weeks proving who you are, she said softly. Now let me show you who I am. The jungle wind caught her hair. Somewhere thunder rumbled. Ghost 7 doesn't miss, she whispered. And the men who once called her Barbie finally understood what a real predator looked like. He didn't even know where to aim his anger. Morrison's rifle lowered inch by inch as Rachel stepped out of the undergrowth. Her clothes still soaked in mud, hair plastered to her face, eyes calm as the jungle burned behind her. For a long moment, no one spoke, only the chirr of insects and the far-off thump of retreating Wagner fire. You're a spy, Morrison finally managed, voice cracking. No, Rachel said evenly. I'm the one who just saved your team. He blinked, confusion and humiliation warring in his eyes. Around him, Stevens and Tank stared like children who just realized the monster under the bed was real, and she'd been sleeping beside them all along. Rachel reached into her vest, producing a waterproof pouch. Her true ID gleamed in the sunlight. United States Intelligence Support Activity, Ghost 7. Morrison's mouth worked soundlessly. You've been spying on us. I've been hunting the man who sold out 12 CIA officers, she said, voice low, steady, including my fiancé. The words hung in the humid air like a confession and a threat all at once. Vega stepped closer, studying her. His voice was quiet. The shot in Mosul, the convoy through the sandstorm, that was you. Rachel didn't answer. She didn't have to. Even through his shock, Morrison bristled. You made us look like fools. No, she said, you did that yourselves. He lunged forward, hand grabbing for her collar, the same move he'd used in training to humiliate her. But this time, his wrist never touched her shirt. Her hand shot up, twisting his arm, pressing a nerve cluster just below the elbow. He gasped, dropping to one knee. 2 weeks, she said quietly. 2 weeks of your bullying, your cruelty, your arrogance. I could have stopped you any time, could have killed you in your sleep. She leaned closer, her tone soft, almost sorrowful. But I didn't, because I needed you blind. She let him go. He stumbled backward, eyes wide, pride bleeding out faster than the cut on his wrist. The others just stared. The jungle shifted around them, a low rumble of thunder. Morrison looked up, voice unsteady. So what now? Rachel's gaze swept across the tree line, scanning the horizon. "Now," she said, "we move. Those Wagner shooters were just the perimeter. The main force will be coming to check what happened." "How do you know that?" Stevens asked. "Because I've been watching them for 3 weeks," she replied. "Documenting their rotations, their response times, their patterns. You know, all that stuff I was doing while you were calling me Barbie." No one answered. She crouched beside a wounded operator, blood pooling under his shoulder. "Pressure bandage," she murmured, working quickly. Her movements were efficient, practiced, the hands of someone who'd saved lives before. Even Tank, the man who once shoved her tray off the table, knelt beside her, helping hold the compress. He didn't meet her eyes, but his silence said everything. For the first time, Rachel saw something resembling humility on his face, maybe even guilt. "The compound where the CIA officers are held," she said while she worked, "is 4 clicks north. Shift change at 600, that's our window." Morrison straightened. "Our window." She looked up at him. "You can stay here and wait for Wagner's reinforcements, or you can follow me and maybe save what's left of your team." He didn't argue again, not really. Because even he knew leadership had just changed hands. They moved through the jungle in near silence. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady, a curtain of water that muffled every sound. Rachel led, her body low and fluid, navigating terrain she'd memorized weeks ago. Behind her, the SEALs followed, quiet now. The same men who mocked her were relying on her footsteps to keep them alive. Funny how quickly respect grows when bullets stop flying and survival depends on the person you underestimated. "Contact left," Rachel whispered suddenly. The team froze. Through the foliage, faint voices in Russian, boots crunching leaves. 6 men, Wagner patrol, standard formation. "They'll pass 40 meters east if we stay low," she breathed. Morrison leaned close. "How can you possibly know that?" Rachel didn't answer. She just raised her fist, a signal for silence. The Russians drew closer. One of the wounded SEALs let out a strangled groan. Tank reached over, clamping a hand over the man's mouth. The patrol came within 20 meters, their outlines visible through the rain, and then moved on, fading into the downpour. Rachel waited another full minute before signaling to move. Vega fell in beside her. "You've done this before." "It's not my first jungle," she said quietly. "Helmand Province, 2018. Extracted a compromised asset. Took 3 days of crawling like this." He nodded, no judgment in his eyes, only respect. They reached an overlook by dawn, a rise that opened to a valley below. Through breaks in the mist, a compound came into view. Fences, guard towers, movement patterns she knew by heart. She unpacked her spotting gear. High-end optics the SEALs hadn't even noticed she'd been carrying. A tablet linked to a drone feed. 12 guards on the perimeter," she murmured. 2 in each tower, roving patrols every 15 minutes. Prisoners are in the northern building, basement level. I count 11 heat signatures." Morrison frowned. 11, you said 12 were taken." Rachel's jaw tightened. "I know what I said." She pulled out her HK sidearm, checked the magazine, then looked up at him. "You'll coordinate from here. I'm going in alone." "Like hell," he snapped. "This is a SEAL operation now." "No," she said, voice steel. "It's been my operation for 6 months." He took a step forward. "You expect us to just sit here while you—" "I expect you to follow orders," she cut in. "I saved your team. Now you help me save mine." Before he could respond, she was gone, melting into the jungle like smoke. Through their scopes, the SEALs watched in disbelief as she approached the compound. Her movements were almost unreal, precise, silent, timed to the rhythm of patrol steps. "She's like a ghost," Stevens whispered. "Yeah," Vega murmured. "That's exactly what she is." Rachel reached the fence, cutting a clean opening in the wire. The nearest guard didn't even glance her way. She slipped inside. A sentry rounded the corner. He never made a sound. One flash of her knife, one steady hand catching his rifle before it hit the ground. Tango down. She dragged the body into shadow, eyes already scanning for the next move. The camera feed flickered with her progress, doorways, stairwells, dim corridors. Down in the basement, the air smelled of rust and fear. Her flashlight beam caught faces behind bars, gaunt, bruised but alive. CIA officers. The first cell opened easily. She pressed a finger to her lips as the prisoner's eyes widened. No words, just motion, move, quietly. Cell by cell she worked, 11 people freed. "Where Michael Tors?" she whispered to the senior officer. "They moved him 3 days ago," he rasped. "Said someone special wanted to meet him." Her stomach tightened. "Volkov," she muttered. There wasn't time to process. "Get these people out first," she ordered. "We'll find him later." She led them up the stairwell, heart pounding in rhythm with every step. Dawn light bled through the cracks in the ceiling, shift change approaching. She raised her radio to her lips. "Ghost 7 to Overwatch. 11 packages ready for extraction. Need a distraction south side." "Roger that," Morrison's voice came through. "Stevens' tank light them up." The jungle erupted with gunfire and explosions. Guards sprinted toward the southern perimeter, drawn like moths to flame. Rachel pushed her group through the northern fence. The path was open. Minutes later, they were clear, trudging back through the jungle toward the extraction point. Morrison was already calling in the birds. "Blackhawks inbound, LZ 2 clicks east." The freed CIA officers limped beside Rachel. Some cried silently. Others just looked at her, awe, disbelief, gratitude. She didn't feel any of it, just exhaustion. When they reached the clearing, she stopped and turned back toward the compound. Through the drifting smoke, movement, a figure in one of the towers. Rachel lifted her rifle, scope glinting in the dawn light. Colonel Davidson, watching the chaos below with satisfaction. "Son of a," Morrison began, but Rachel was already squeezing the trigger. The tower window shattered. Davidson dove aside. She saw him fall, but not far enough. "He's alive," she hissed. The traitor who'd sold out his own people had escaped again. "Move," she snapped. "He'll call reinforcements." The march to the LZ was agony. The wounded stumbled. The rescued officers needed support. But something had changed. The SEALs who once mocked her now followed her lead without hesitation. Morrison stayed quiet, pride finally silenced. When they reached the clearing, the sound of rotor blades split the sky. 2 Blackhawks dropped into the open field, door gunners scanning the trees. As they loaded the wounded and the rescued, Morrison caught her arm. "You're coming with us." Rachel shook her head. "Davidson's still out there, and Michael." "That's why you need backup," he said firmly. "You saved our lives, let us help save his." Before she could answer, her encrypted phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. "Want your fiancé back. Come alone. Warehouse District, Bogota, no tricks. VULOV." Rachel's blood went cold. She showed the screen to Morrison, his jaw clenched. "Vyulov, Wagner commander, this is a trap." She nodded. "Of course it is." He stepped closer. "Doesn't mean you have to walk into it." Her hand tightened on the rifle sling. "Doesn't mean I won't." The helicopter engines roared, the jungle whipping around them. Rachel looked back one last time at the men who had once called her weak. They looked at her now like something sacred. And as the bird lifted off, dust and light swirling in the dawn, she whispered to herself, quiet enough that only she could hear it. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Why did the message sound almost polite, for an execution invitation? Rachel stared at the encrypted text glowing against the dim cabin light of the Blackhawk. "Want your fiancé back. Come alone. Warehouse District, Bogota, no tricks. VULOV. The words burned through her retinas long after she closed the phone. Outside, jungle blurred into mountains. The rescued officers lay silent, bandaged, half-conscious. Morrison sat across from her, watching. He didn't say anything, but his eyes held the question he didn't dare ask. Are you really going to walk into that? She answered anyway. If it's a trap, I'll spring it. He frowned. That's not a strategy, Cooper, that's suicide. She didn't look up. It's the only way they'll bring Michael out alive. The engines roared louder. Somewhere beneath the noise, her pulse beat slow and steady, the rhythm of someone who'd already made peace with dying. At base, chaos awaited them. MPs swarmed the operations compound. Davidson's quarters were being torn apart by investigators. His laptop, his comm devices, even his coffee mug bagged and tagged. But the man himself, gone. Someone tipped him off, Vega muttered as they entered the armory. Rachel didn't respond. She moved with quiet precision, choosing her loadout piece by piece, the same way a pianist chooses keys before a final symphony. Rifle, pistol, suppressors, trauma kit, climbing gear, 3 magazines, no backup. When she was done, she looked smaller, somehow lighter. The kind of lightness that comes from letting go of everything that isn't mission critical, even fear. Morrison blocked her path as she turned to leave. You're not going alone. This isn't your fight. You made it our fight the moment you saved us, he said. You showed us what strength actually looks like. We're coming. Her jaw tightened. Vyulov said, come alone. Then we'll be ghosts, Morrison replied. You taught us how. There was something almost human in his smile now, humility instead of ego. For the first time, she didn't hate him for it. The flight to Bogota was quiet. The city unfolded beneath them in shadows, sprawling, electric, alive. Neon bled across the smog. Rain-slicked rooftops shimmered under streetlights like molten glass. Rachel moved through it like a phantom, blending into the noise. Civilian clothes, hair tied back, rifle disassembled inside a camera case once again. The streets pulsed with life, traffic, shouting, music from unseen bars. None of it touched her. Her focus narrowed to the coordinates burned into her memory. Warehouse District 9. Dock 43. The others, Morrison, Vega, Stevens, Tank, were already in position, hidden in overlapping overwatch zones, comms dark, weapons ready. She didn't know that for sure, but she knew them now, and she knew they wouldn't let her die alone. The warehouse loomed at the end of an empty street, corrugated steel walls, one open door leaking yellow light into the rain. A trap so obvious it almost insulted her intelligence. She stepped inside anyway. The air was thick with oil, gunmetal, and old blood, crates stacked high, catwalks overhead, a space designed for ambush, no cover, no exits. Ghost 7, a voice called from the shadows. Male, Russian, amused. The legendary female sniper, I've studied your work. Vyulov stepped into the light. Tall, broad, scar bisecting his cheek like a knife wound that never quite healed. Tactical gear, no visible weapons. The kind of man who didn't need to carry a gun to be dangerous. He smiled, and it wasn't a kind one. You're shot in Aleppo between 2 buildings through a sandstorm. Magnificent, almost artistic. Rachel's eyes stayed on his hands. Where, Michael? Straight to business, he said. I admire that. He gestured toward a closed door on the far end of the room. Through there, but first we talk. About what? About how someone like you exists. He began circling her like a wolf testing the perimeter of a fire. In my country, we celebrated female snipers. In yours, you hide them, pretend they don't exist. Yet here you are with more confirmed kills than anyone on record, a phantom in plain sight. Rachel didn't flinch. You didn't lure me here to flatter me. No, he said softly. I lured you here to offer you a choice. He stopped in front of her, close enough for her to smell the smoke on his clothes. Join us. Wagner pays better than the CIA. No politics, no patriotism, just profit. You'd fit perfectly among wolves. I already hunt predators, she said quietly. I don't join them. His smile widened, even when your own country betrayed you. Her pulse quickened, not fear, anger. He saw it. Yes, he said. We know about Davidson, sold your people out, sold you out, but at least he was honest about it. Your government sends you to die for ideals that change with every election. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. And yet you serve men who sell children for cocaine. Vyulov's jaw flexed, the smile vanished. Pity, he said at last. Then you'll die with your ideals intact. The gunfire came from everywhere. Shadows unfolded from the catwalks, Wagner shooters, a dozen at least. Rachel dove behind a steel support beam as rounds tore through crates, sparks flashing off metal. Her rifle barked twice, 2 clean kills before they even realized where she was. Then she rolled left, firing again, each shot a heartbeat, each heartbeat a calculation. 3 down, 4. Morrison's voice broke through her earpiece. Danger close, get low. She dropped flat. The skylight above shattered, ropes whipping down like lightning. Seals descended through the smoke, rifles blazing. The warehouse erupted into chaos. For a moment, time fractured, muzzle flashes lighting the rain, shouts in English and Russian colliding, the smell of cordite thick enough to taste. Rachel rose, reloaded, pivoted. Her world shrank to the next target, the next breath. Left catwalk clear, Vega shouted. Right clear, Tank echoed. When the gunfire finally stopped, the only sound left was the rain dripping through holes in the roof. Vyulov was gone. Rachel sprinted toward the back door, the one he'd pointed to earlier. It was ajar, light spilling through. She kicked it open. Inside, a single chair, a man slumped in it. Michael! Her heart stuttered. She rushed forward, then froze. Too perfect, too easy. Vyulov stepped from the shadows, pistol pressed to Michael's temple. Drop it, he said. She lifted her rifle halfway, calculating distances. 30 feet, no clear shot. Slowly, she lowered the weapon. Kick it away. She did. The rifle clattered across the concrete. He smiled faintly. Good girl. Behind her, she could still hear the echo of seals clearing the main room. She had seconds before they breached. Seconds before everything turned red. You know what I admire most about you, Vyulov said conversationally. Not your kills. Anyone can kill. It's the times you didn't. The times you let them live. Such sentiment, he chuckled. Weakness. It's called humanity, she said. He shrugged. Predictable humanity. He shifted slightly, not much, but enough. His stance opened, a deliberate invitation. He wanted her to take the shot. Which meant... The door behind her exploded inward. Rachel spun, sidearm flashing up, and froze. Colonel Davidson stood there, alive, rifle raised. For a second, no one moved. 3 lines of death drawn in the space of a heartbeat. Davidson aiming at her, Vyulov aiming at Michael, Rachel caught in between. Then everything happened at once. Davidson's finger tightened on the trigger. Vyulov turned to fire. Rachel fired twice, instinct taking over. But Morrison's shot hit first. The round slammed into Davidson's chest, center mass. He staggered but didn't fall. Body armor. Rachel's 2 rounds found his throat. He dropped, choking on betrayal. She turned just in time to see Vyulov's pistol flash. The round passed so close to her ear, she felt its heat. But the bullet wasn't meant for her. Behind Vyulov, one of his own men, a hidden sniper, crumpled, blood spraying the wall. Vyulov spun in confusion. Rachel moved. She closed the distance in 3 steps, blade flashing. Her knife buried in his side, driving upward deep. He gasped, dropping the pistol. She leaned close, her voice a whisper. That shot in Aleppo you admired, I had a spotter. His eyes widened in recognition. "Michael Tors," she whispered, "best wind reader in the business." Then she twisted the blade. Vyulov's knees buckled. His body hit the ground, eyes still open but already empty. "Rachel." Michael's voice was a rasp, weak but alive. She caught him as he slumped forward, lowering him gently. "Hey, I've got you. You're okay." "Thought they'd broken me," he murmured. "Told them Ghost 7 doesn't miss." She smiled through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Good answer." Morrison burst in, rifle raised, then stopped at the sight. "You got him?" Rachel nodded. "Yeah, I got him." Behind them, the other SEALs secured the room, clearing corners, checking bodies. The war was over, for now. Vega approached quietly. "You saved him." She shook her head. "He saved himself, I just showed up." He looked down at Vyulov's corpse, and him. She stared at the body, expression unreadable. He learned what happens when you create monsters. Hours later, Rachel sat beside Michael in the evac helicopter. His head rested against her shoulder, an IV line in his arm. The others gave her space. Stevens offered a thermos of coffee, not as an apology, just as acknowledgement. She took it. "You were right," he said softly. "You don't announce strength, you show it." Rachel looked out the window. Bogota lights stretched below, cold and endless. "Most people never see it until it's too late," she murmured. The bird tilted east, slicing through the clouds. Somewhere far behind them, the warehouse still burned. And in its ashes lay two men, one who'd sold his soul and one who thought he could buy hers. Both wrong. Because ghosts don't bargain, they settle debts. Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? In the helicopter's dim cabin, only the thrum of rotors filled the air, a steady, relentless rhythm that mimicked Rachel's heartbeat. Michael lay strapped to a stretcher beside her, pale but breathing. The medics worked in quiet efficiency. Tubes, monitors, whispered commands. The world had narrowed again, not to a target, not to a shot, but to the fragile rise and fall of his chest. Every time his breath caught, her own did too. The mission was over, at least on paper. Volkov was dead. Davidson was dead. The 12 CIA officers were alive. The SEALs were safe. But Rachel knew better. Missions didn't end, they just changed shape. At the base hospital, dawn broke gray and unremarkable. Rachel hadn't slept in 38 hours. She sat in a plastic chair outside the surgical wing, rifle case between her boots, uniform still streaked with blood, some hers, most not. The smell of antiseptic was worse than jungle rot. It stripped everything human from the air. Morrison appeared from the hallway carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. He held one out. "They say it's coffee," he muttered. "I'm not convinced." She took it anyway, fingers brushing his just briefly. For a long moment they didn't speak. The silence wasn't awkward, just heavy. "How do you do it?" he asked finally. "Carry that much skill, that much experience, and hide it like it's nothing." Rachel stared at the steam curling from her cup. "My grandfather taught me something a long time ago," she said quietly. "True strength doesn't announce itself. It just is. People who announce are usually trying to convince themselves." Morrison nodded slowly. The man who once measured respect in decibels now sat humbled before quiet. "We could have gotten you killed with our stupidity," he said. "But you didn't," she replied. "Still," he said, "you deserved better." Rachel almost smiled. "You all learned something. That's better than an apology." He shifted in his seat. "The team's putting you in for a silver star, for saving us, for everything." "No," her voice was sharp, immediate. "Ghost 7 doesn't exist. Never has, never will. That's how I stay effective." He looked at her for a long time. "Then what can we do?" "Learn," she said simply. "Teach. Make sure the next woman who joins your unit doesn't face what I did, even if she's just a cook, or a translator, or a mechanic." Morrison stared down into his coffee. Copy that, he said quietly. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was understanding. 3 hours later, the surgeon emerged. Michael would live. The relief hit Rachel like a body blow. She didn't cry. She used up those tears years ago, somewhere between Syria and the Badlands of Helmand. But something deep inside her unclenched, like a wire finally cut free. She found herself standing outside his room, without remembering how she'd gotten there. Michael was asleep, tubes running from his arms, chest wrapped in bandages. His face still him, still hers. "Hey, Trouble," she whispered. "Told you I'd find you." The monitors beeped steadily in answer. She sat beside him, resting her head against the rail, finally letting exhaustion pull her under. The debriefs began before the blood even dried. CIA analysts, military intelligence, Joint Command, everyone wanted their piece of Ghost 7. They called it an after-action review. Rachel called it extraction with words instead of scalpels. Colonel Davidson's betrayal had detonated like a bomb inside the command structure. 3 years of selling information, 27 operations compromised, 43 American and Allied deaths. Money traced to shell companies in Cyprus and Switzerland, millions in blood money. Davidson's files also revealed contact with Volkov's network, logistics, intelligence, coordinates. He'd been feeding them everything, and in return they'd made him rich. But buried deeper in those files, analysts found something worse, references to others. Other moles, other ghosts, a shadow web operating beneath official channels. Rachel sat across from the general leading the investigation, Harrison, broad-shouldered, weary, too old for idealism but still clinging to it. "You understand what this means," he said. "This network, it's global, self-sustaining. They used Davidson to feed us lies and cripple us from the inside." Rachel nodded. "And now they'll try again with someone new." "Which is why we need you," Harrison said. "You know their methods. You've lived in their shadows. Help us rebuild, identify, counter." Rachel's eyes drifted to the window, sunlight spilling across the base runway, glinting off metal wings. "I'm not interested," she said softly. "My mission's complete." "Your country needs—" "My country," she interrupted, "needs to treat its warriors better, all of them, not just the ones who look the part." She stood collecting her few belongings. Her battered backpack, the jacket that had hidden ceramic armor, the photo of Michael smiling in some forgotten past. "I've got a wedding to plan," she said, and walked out before Harrison could argue. The ceremony was small. No uniforms, no medals, just family, a few friends, and those who knew how to keep secrets. The sky was soft blue, the kind of color you almost don't trust after years of gray skis and night missions. Michael stood at the altar, still recovering but upright, his smile a little crooked now. The scars suited him. When Rachel appeared, simple dress, hair loose for once, even Morrison, seated in the back, felt his throat tighten. He'd seen her kill with surgical precision. He'd seen her walk through death without flinching. But this was the most powerful thing she'd ever done. She'd chosen to live. After the vows, Morrison approached her, bouquet in hand. "For the strongest person I know," he said, "your former distraction." She laughed softly, taking the flowers. "You've come a long way, Lieutenant." "So have you," he said. Her eyes softened. "I never left." He nodded. "That's what scares me." 3 weeks later, reports began to surface. A Wagner commander found dead in Venezuela. Long-range shot, impossible angle, over a kilometer away. On the wall, a message scrawled in Russian. "Ghost 7 sends regards." Rachel was provably at home that night, hosting a small dinner, security cameras and neighbors all confirming her presence. She smiled when she saw the news. Because ghosts don't leave fingerprints. Life settled into something almost normal. Morning coffee, physical therapy for Michael, occasional visits from Morrison's reformed team. Stevens and Tank now ran workshops for new recruits on discipline, respect, integration. They never mentioned Rachel by name, but her shadow hung over every lecture. Change slow but real. Rachel started teaching marksmanship at a local range, officially for military spouses, unofficially for anyone who'd ever been told they weren't built for it. Her students adored her. They didn't know her history. They didn't need to. One day, a teenage girl stayed after class, awkward and quiet. "They said I shoot like a guy," she said softly. Rachel smiled. "No," she said, "you shoot like someone who hits what she aims at. That's all that matters." The girl's eyes lit up. That flicker of self-worth Rachel had once needed too. Maybe that was enough. At night, though, peace was harder to keep. Sometimes she'd wake drenched in sweat, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Sometimes she'd hear Volkov's voice, or see Davidson's blood pooling like spilled ink. She'd sit by the window until dawn, watching the stars fade. The psychologist had called it operational echo. The body leaves the battlefield long before the mind does. Rachel called it memory with perfect aim. She told no one. Some ghosts are better left unspoken. Months later, Morrison invited her to lecture at a special operations symposium, Integration and Modern Asymmetric Warfare. She declined politely, but she sent a message instead. "Teach them what you learned, not what you were taught." That line became the opening slide of his presentation. It changed more minds than any speech could have. On a quiet Sunday morning, Rachel found herself sitting on the porch beside Michael. He'd traded the field for analysis work, still CIA, but behind a desk now. Safer, mostly. The sun climbed lazily over the Montana hills. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. "Feels strange," he said softly, "not waiting for orders." "That's the point," she said. He looked at her, smile faint. "You mean to tell me the woman who infiltrated cartel networks and outshot Wagner snipers actually likes silence?" "I'm learning," she said. He leaned back, studying her. "You're really done then? No more missions, no more ghosts?" Rachel's gaze drifted to the tree line. She could tell you the wind speed just by watching the leaves move, the barometric pressure by how her lungs felt, the range of the nearest ridge by instinct. "Yeah," she said, "I'm retired." Michael chuckled. "You said that like someone making a promise to break it." "Maybe," she said softly. He reached for her hand. "You'll tell me if that phone rings again." She squeezed back. "You'll know before I do." For a long time, they sat there, two soldiers pretending the war was over. But in her mind, Rachel could still hear the whisper of her rifle's bolts sliding forward. A sound that never really leaves you. A sound that means control, purpose, justice. When night came, the stars were bright, crisp against the black. Rachel stood by the window, hands resting on the frame. Michael slept behind her, peaceful for once. The world looked deceptively still. But stillness had a sound if you listened closely, a frequency that only people like her could hear. The world's wrongs humming softly, waiting for balance. Her phone sat on the dresser, dark and silent. For now. Why did peace feel so loud? The mornings in Montana were supposed to be still. The kind of stillness that promised healing, open skies, soft winds, the smell of pine. But for Rachel, the silence screamed. Every clatter in the kitchen made her flinch. Every crow overhead turned into the echo of a chopper blade. Every creak in the house became the metallic slide of a bolt. It wasn't fear. It was memory sharpening itself on the edge of habit. She woke early, always before the sun. Coffee, range practice, a 2-mile run down the gravel road past the fence line. The routine kept her sane, or at least kept her from losing what was left of sanity. Michael was different. He adapted faster. Maybe because he wanted to, maybe because he had to. He'd taken a quiet job as a CIA analyst, tracking digital networks, supply chains, cyber leaks. Work that didn't draw blood. Work he could leave at the desk when he came home. At night, they'd sit together on the porch, pretending peace was a permanent assignment. But peace was a liar. It always came with conditions. The first letter arrived in early spring. No return address, plain envelope, her name written in small, deliberate handwriting. Inside, a single photograph. Davidson. Alive. At least that's what it looked like. The photo was grainy surveillance quality, taken at night, somewhere industrial. He was walking toward a black SUV, bandage still visible under his collar. Rachel stared at the image for a long time, expression unreadable. Then she burned it in the kitchen sink. Michael came in halfway through, the smell of singed paper in the air. "What's that?" "Junk mail," she said without looking up. He didn't press. But her pulse stayed quick long after the flame died. Days passed, then another envelope. This time no photo, just coordinates. She entered them into her old encrypted tablet. Eastern Europe, Ukraine border. The location made no sense. Davidson had been declared dead, DNA confirmed, yet someone was baiting her with impossible ghosts. She tried to ignore it, tried to bury herself in normalcy, dinners, laughter, the kind of quiet affection she'd once believed she wasn't built for. But she knew herself too well. The moment she saw those coordinates, something inside her had shifted. Peace had been a disguise. The mission was the truth. A week later, Morrison called. "Rachel," his tone was cautious like he already knew, "you've seen the intel packet." "I burned it." "Of course you did," he said dryly. "And then?" "Then I didn't stop thinking about it." There was a sigh on the line. "Command reopened the Davidson case last month. Intel suggests he might have faked his death with Volkov's help. We're not sure who's behind it now, but the network's alive." "You're sure it's not disinformation?" "Wish I was." A pause. "We need eyes we can trust, someone who knows how they think." She smiled faintly. "You mean someone who's already broken the rules once?" "Exactly. I'm retired, Morrison." He chuckled. "Yeah, and I'm a ballet dancer." The line went quiet for a moment before he added softer, "I wouldn't ask if it didn't matter." Rachel said nothing. When she finally hung up, the decision had already been made. She didn't tell Michael at first. She told herself it was for his peace of mind. But the truth was simpler. She was afraid of seeing the disappointment in his eyes. He noticed anyway. "You've been quiet," he said one evening as they washed dishes. "Have I?" He dried his hands, leaning against the counter. "You've been scanning exits every time we walk into a store, checking reflections. You think I don't notice?" Rachel stared at the window, the reflection of her own face in the glass. "Just habit." "Habits don't come back this hard unless something wakes them." She turned to him. "You don't want to know." "Try me." The silence stretched until she finally said it. "Davidson might still be alive." He blinked. "What?" "I got a photo, coordinates. Morrison confirmed chatter if it's true." "Rachel," his voice broke, somewhere between pleading and disbelief. "We buried that man. You put a bullet in his throat." "I know." "Then let him stay dead." "I can't." He shook his head, stepping back. "You can't or you will." She looked down at the counter, water dripping from her hands. "Both." He stared at her for a long time, then said softly, "If you walk out that door again, I'm not sure you'll come back." She looked up. "That's what I'm afraid of too." 3 nights later, she was gone. No goodbye, no note, just an empty bed and the faint smell of gun oil in the air. Michael found the folded uniform on the dresser, neatly pressed, untouched. Beside it, her wedding ring. He sank to the floor, head in his hands. He knew her too well to think it was a betrayal. It was instinct, the kind of instinct that doesn't retire. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. Rachel's journey back into the field was quiet. New passport, civilian clothes, false trail. She used the name Evelyn Cross, journalist, cover story watertight. Morrison's team fed her satellite data through encrypted channels, but on paper she was alone. Europe was colder than she remembered. Wars don't always make noise anymore. Some just hum, unseen, digital, perfectly legal until the moment they are. The border town was a mix of rusted rail yards and flickering lights. Her target, a logistics hub linked to black market weapons and stolen NATO intel. At night, freight trains screamed through the valley like ghosts of the old Iron Curtain. She found a room above a bar, window facing the main street. She waited, watched, recorded. Days turned into a rhythm, surveillance, data, reports, silence. Until one night a convoy rolled through, 3 black SUVs, headlights off, engines purring. She raised her camera, zooming in. And froze. Davidson. Older, beard, same eyes. Alive. She exhaled slowly, steadying her hands. Every muscle in her body screamed to act, but she knew better. Not yet. This was proof. She uploaded the images, sent them through the encrypted channel. Target confirmed, moving east. Morrison replied seconds later, "Do not engage, we're moving assets." But Rachel didn't wait for assets. She followed. The convoy led her to an abandoned airstrip outside the town, rusted hangars, floodlights flickering weakly. She parked her rental in the shadows, grabbed her pack and began to move. Her breath misted in the cold. Halfway across the tarmac she heard footsteps, too light to be guards, too deliberate. She froze. A whisper cut through the dark, "You're a hard woman to find, Cooper." She spun, pistol raised. Morrison stepped from the shadows, hands up. "Easy, it's me." "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving your ass, apparently," he said. "Command intercepted your transmission. They sent me to pull you out before you did something stupid." "I wasn't going to engage." He raised an eyebrow. "You brought a rifle, Rachel." She didn't answer. He sighed. "You've been off the grid for 3 weeks. Michael's been calling every base on the planet." Her throat tightened. "You shouldn't have told him." "Too late. He's the one who got you the clearance to move this far undetected." She looked away. "He shouldn't have." Morrison studied her for a moment. "You really think you can finish this without him?" Rachel's jaw flexed. "He deserves peace." "And you do." She didn't answer. Because she knew the truth. Peace was for people who hadn't seen what she had. They moved together across the perimeter, 2 ghosts in the mist. Through her scope, Rachel watched Davidson step out of the hangar, flanked by armed men. He was thinner now, paler but alive. He spoke into a satellite phone, packing slowly, cigarette smoke trailing like a signal. Morrison whispered, "We can take him now, 1 clean shot." Rachel's finger brushed the trigger. "No, he's not alone." Through the scope, she saw another figure step into view. Female. Young. American. She was holding a data drive. "What the hell?" Morrison muttered. Rachel's blood ran cold. "She's ours." "How do you know?" "I trained her." The girl was trembling as she handed the drive to Davidson. He smiled, said something, and gestured for one of his men to take her away. That was all Rachel needed to see. She exhaled once. Pulled the trigger. Davidson's cigarette dropped first, then he did. The girl screamed. Chaos exploded across the airfield, men shouting, flashlights whipping in every direction. Morrison grabbed her arm. "We're blown, move." But Rachel didn't move. She was staring through the scope, frozen. Because where Davidson fell, another figure was moving, dragging his body toward cover. Volkov. Alive. and smiling straight into her scope. The shock lasted half a heartbeat before Morrison yanked her back behind the wall. Bullets sparked off concrete, shattering glass. "Go, go," he shouted. They ran, boots pounding the tarmac, rounds chasing them through the fog. Somewhere behind, a voice barked orders in Russian. Rachel didn't need to translate. Volkov hadn't just survived, he'd built something bigger. And now he knew she was coming. They reached the tree line as the first vehicles roared to life. Morrison slumped against a fallen log, breathing hard. Well, guess retirement officially over. Rachel checked her magazine, face unreadable. "Not yet," she said, "but it's about to be." She looked back at the airfield, flames flickering, shadows moving like memories. And in that chaos, she saw the girl, the one she'd trained, being shoved into a truck. Her student, her responsibility. The next mission had just chosen itself. How many ghosts did it take before the living started to look like one of them? Rachel's breath fogged in the pre-dawn cold as she crouched beside Morrison in the forest, eyes fixed on the glow of the burning airstrip below. Volkov's men swarmed the wreckage like ants, cleaning, shouting, dragging bodies. She knew the rhythm. This wasn't retreat, it was reorganization. Volkov never reacted, he restructured. Morrison whispered beside her, "That was him, wasn't it?" Rachel nodded. "He doesn't die easy. You put a knife in his lung." Apparently not deep enough. They watched as the convoy prepared to leave, trucks, 2 black SUVs and 1 armored transport. Rachel zoomed her scope, scanning faces through the fog. And then she saw her. The girl. Nora Reed, 23, intelligence analyst turned field asset, the first trainee Rachel had ever mentored personally. She taught her how to read wind, how to steady breath between beats, how to shoot without hate. And now Nora sat in the back of the armored truck, bound and blindfolded. Rachel's jaw tightened. They're moving her. Where? East. Looks like they're heading for the border. Volkov's not going to kill her. He's going to use her. Use her for what? Morrison asked. Rachel's eyes didn't leave the scope. Leverage, or proof, to show the world Ghost 7 isn't a ghost after all. They tracked the convoy from a distance, moving through dense forest, keeping parallel to the dirt road. Morrison checked his GPS. They're heading toward Mykolaiv. There's an old missile silo network there, decommissioned on paper, still active under the table. Rachel nodded. Volkov loves using ghosts, dead sites, erased assets, forgotten wars. After an hour, the convoy split, 2 vehicles veering north, the armored transport continuing east. "That's our one," she murmured. They cut down toward the road, intercepting through tree lines. The sound of engines was faint but steady. Morrison crouched. "We need to plan." But Rachel was already moving. He grabbed her arm. "You can't just—" "I trained her," she said, eyes locked on the road ahead. "If she breaks, they'll get names, locations, entire networks. I'm not losing another one." He exhaled hard, then followed. "You're insane." "I'm consistent," she replied. The ambush was surgical. Rachel waited behind a fallen tree, heartbeat syncing with the vibrations in the ground as the armored truck approached. Morrison planted 2 small charges under the roadside dirt. He gave her a look. She nodded. Boom! The first explosion ripped through the path ahead, not enough to kill, just to stop. The vehicle skidded, tires shrieking. Before the dust even settled, Rachel fired, 1 clean shot through the driver's side window. The truck jerked to a halt. Morrison sprinted forward, covering the flank. Rachel moved low and fast, weapon steady, muzzle flash lighting the dark like lightning. A guard emerged from the passenger side. She dropped him before he could shout. Another tried to flank right. Morrison caught him mid-step. The gunfire faded as quickly as it started. Then silence. Rachel reached the back of the truck and yanked the doors open. Inside, Nora, duct tape over her mouth, wrists bound, blindfolded. Rachel cut her free. Hey, it's me, it's over. Nora blinked against the light, confusion giving way to disbelief. Rachel. Rachel helped her out of the truck. You okay? Where'd Volkov? Rachel shook her head. Not here, he sent you as bait. Morrison joined them, rifle raised. This was too easy. He was right. Rachel heard it before she saw it, the low hum, rising fast. Drone. She shoved Nora down. Cover. The missile hit the truck dead center. Fire erupted, flinging metal and dirt in every direction. Rachel hit the ground hard, ears ringing. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. We're compromised, move. They dove into the tree line as secondary explosions rocked the road. The truck burned bright against the darkness. Their extraction, their proof, their cover gone. Rachel pulled Nora along the forest path, lungs burning. How many more? She shouted. Too many, Morrison replied. We need to get underground. Nearest structure. He checked his GPS. Old bunker complex 5 clicks north. Then we move. They ran until dawn. By the time they reached the bunker, all three were exhausted. The structure loomed half-buried under the earth, concrete, steel, vines reclaiming its edges. Rachel forced the rusted door open, the groan echoing into the dark. Inside, the air was damp and stale. Dust hung like fog. They set up a small perimeter, checked for tripwires, then collapsed against the walls. Nora's hands trembled as she drank from a canteen. They killed the others, she whispered. Everyone who tried to leave. Davidson was supposed to be dead. He is, Rachel said softly. Then who was I delivering the data to? Rachel exchanged a look with Morrison. Explain. Nora took a shaky breath. They told me it was a CIA handoff, secure courier chain. I was supposed to bring an encryption key. I didn't know what it unlocked. But the drop wasn't agency. It was private, contracted. And when I got there, I saw him, Volkov, alive. Rachel leaned back, mind racing. Volkov's not just running black ops, he's selling them. He's franchising war. Exactly, Morrison said grimly. And Davidson was the prototype. Nora looked between them. They said something before you showed up, about the next phase, something called Specter protocol. Rachel froze. The name hit her like a knife. That's impossible, she murmured. Morrison frowned. What is it? Rachel's voice was low, almost reverent. It's a fail-safe program I helped design 6 years ago, an autonomous system for deep cover identification. It uses AI to replicate command signatures. If it's active, Volkov could impersonate anyone in the chain of command, Morrison finished. Issue orders, move money, redirect missions. No one would know. Nora looked terrified. He said it was already online. For a while no one spoke. The bunker's silence pressed in, heavy and absolute. Finally Morrison broke it. We can't take this to command. If Volkov's using Specter, they'll never believe us, or worse, they'll think we're the breach. Rachel nodded slowly. We go off-grid, track the network ourselves. Nora hesitated. We. Rachel looked at her. You're not going back into that system, Nora. You're staying with me until this is over. The younger woman's eyes hardened. You train me to survive, not hide. Rachel almost smiled. And look how well you listened. The faintest ghost of humor crossed Nora's face, the first in days. Morrison exhaled. All right, we go dark, but once we find Volkov, we don't capture him, we end it, permanently. Rachel's gaze was steady. Agreed. That night's sleep was thin and full of noise. Rachel dreamed of the jungle again, the burning compound, the blood, Davidson's eyes as he fell. But this time, when she raised her rifle, she saw Nora in the scope. She woke with a start, hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Nora was awake too, sitting by the faint glow of a lantern. You used to dream like that. Rachel nodded. Every night. Does it ever stop? No. They sat in silence for a long time before Nora whispered, "You killed him, didn't you? Volkov." Rachel hesitated. "I thought I did." "Would you do it again?" Rachel met her eyes. "If it keeps others alive, yes. But that's the problem with killing men like him. Every bullet just writes a sequel." Nora looked away. "Maybe that's why you train people like me, to change the ending." Rachel smiled faintly. "Maybe." By morning, they were already moving again. Volkov's network was active: bank transfers, encrypted chatter, movement of weapons. Nora tracked the signals on a salvaged laptop, her hands trembling from adrenaline. "They're setting up near Odessa," she said. "Signal triangulates from a port facility, probably an old smuggling route." Morrison checked his rifle. "That's close enough for us to walk in and ruin someone's week." Rachel studied the screen. "No, we do this right, one clean hit. No chaos, no trace." Nora frowned. "That's not how ghosts work." Rachel looked up at her. "That's exactly how ghosts work." By dusk, they reached the overlook above the port. The sea stretched dark and endless below, lights flickering across docked ships. Rachel set up her rifle, adjusting the bipod, her movements automatic, ritualistic. Through her scope, she saw Volkov, standing at the pier talking to men in suits, civilian contractors, American accents. Her stomach turned. He's not just buying weapons, he's selling access. Morrison looked through his binoculars. "To who?" Rachel's voice hardened. "To everyone." She steadied her aim. The crosshair found his chest. For a moment, time froze, just like it had in Aleppo, in the jungle, in every place she'd learned to trade breath for silence. She could end it now. But her finger didn't move. Because in that instant, she realized Volkov wasn't the problem anymore. He was just a symptom. "Rachel," Morrison whispered. She exhaled slowly. "Not yet." She packed the rifle, standing. "We need the data, proof of Specter's operation. Killing him now just buries the truth." Morrison stared. "You've changed." "Not really," she said. "I just finally learned what aim means." That night, under the cover of fog and salt air, they infiltrated the port. 3 ghosts, 1 mission. But somewhere deep in the dark, Volkov smiled. Because ghosts don't haunt the living forever. Eventually, something haunts them back. Why did every mission that mattered start in silence? The kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums until you could hear your own pulse. Rachel crouched behind a rusted container overlooking the port, night vision tinting the world in ghost green. The sea beyond was black glass, swallowing sound. In the distance, floodlights swept lazily over stacks of cargo crates, each one stamped with fake company logos that meant nothing and everything at once. Through her earpiece, Morrison's whisper crackled. 2 patrols, routine. No dogs, cameras on a 30-second sweep. "Copy," Rachel murmured. "We move on my mark." Beside her, Nora adjusted her headset, hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. "How long until the patrol loops back?" 18 seconds, Rachel said. "Plenty of time if we don't think about dying." Nora gave a nervous laugh. "Comforting." Morrison's voice cut in, low but firm. "Eyes forward, rookie." Rachel glanced at him. The man had changed too. Gone was the arrogance, replaced by the same calm she used to fake. War had a way of sanding people down to truth. She raised 2 fingers, the signal. They moved. Their boots kissed the wet concrete without sound. They slipped through the gaps between shipping containers, staying in the shadows of flickering lights. Every corner felt alive, as if the darkness itself might blink. At the edge of the main loading dock, Nora paused, eyes wide. "There," she whispered. "Office complex. That's where the data uplink's running from." Through the window, faint blue light glowed. the kind of sterile illumination that came from screens, not bulbs. Rachel nodded. That's where Volkov's running Specter. Then that's where we end it, Morrison said. But Rachel didn't move yet. Her instincts screamed. The layout was too open, too quiet. A memory flashed Mosul, the sandstorm, the ambush that killed half her unit because command said it's clear. Silence never meant safety, it meant bait. Nora, she said quietly, you sure that's the only uplink? Yes, thermal shows one server core central hub high output. It's broadcasting now. Rachel exhaled. All right, you and Morrison get to the terminal, copy the data, I'll cover from above. He frowned. You're splitting up again. She looked at him. You know I work better alone. He smirked faintly. That's debatable. But he didn't argue. Rachel climbed the side of a cargo crane, boots finding steel rungs slick with salt. Wind tore at her jacket as she reached the top, rifle slung and ready. From up here she could see everything, the sprawl of containers, the narrow corridors between them, the office glowing like a pulse in the dark. She exhaled, slowing her heart. The crosshairs settled. Below, Morrison and Nora moved like phantoms, entering the office through a side door. Rachel watched their every step. Through her scope, she saw Nora at the computer, fingers flying over keys. Morrison scanned the perimeter, rifle sweeping arcs. Then Rachel saw movement. A reflection. Second floor. Shadow shifting behind the glass. 2 tangos above you, she whispered. Second floor, north window. Copy, Morrison said. He raised his rifle, fired twice. Glass shattered. 2 bodies dropped. Nora flinched but didn't stop typing. Almost there, she whispered. It's encrypted deep, he built redundancies. How long? Rachel asked. 30 seconds. Rachel scanned the horizon again and froze. The ocean. Lights. Dozens. Small boats approaching fast, their wakes silver in the moonlight. Morrison, we've got inbound. 10, maybe 12 vessels. He cursed, they're sealing the port. Nora looked up, panic in her eyes. I can't stop now, it's mid-transfer. Finish it, Rachel said, we'll hold. She shifted position, breath steadying. Through her scope, she counted targets as they disembarked, mercenaries, not soldiers, paid killers. She fired once, one fell. Again, another. Her shots were surgical, rhythm, precision, inevitability. But for everyone that dropped, 3 more took his place. Below, Morrison fired from cover, holding the entrance. They're flanking. Pull back, Rachel shouted. Nora, move. 5 more seconds. Rachel's magazine clicked empty. She reloaded fast, eyes burning. Now, Nora yelled, got it. Morrison grabbed her by the arm, dragging her toward the side exit. Go. They sprinted through the rain, alarms blaring. Rachel fired down, covering them, picking off pursuers with cold efficiency. Then the unthinkable. A rocket streaked from one of the boats, trailing smoke. It hit the crane's base. The world erupted. Rachel felt herself thrown backward, the sky spinning, the sea and stars trading places. She hit the deck hard, pain blooming white. Her ears rang. The world came back in fragments, fire, shouting, the taste of iron in her mouth. She tried to move, couldn't. Her radio crackled through the static. Rachel, Rachel, do you copy? Morrison. She coughed, I'm fine. Get to extraction point Delta, North Pier. She pushed herself up, muscles screaming. What about the data? Secured, Nora's voice broke through, breathless. We've got it. Rachel stumbled toward the dock, vision narrowing. The air reeked of burning diesel and salt. Every step felt like it belonged to someone else. They regrouped behind a shipping truck, smoke thick around them. Nora clutched a hard drive to her chest. It's all here, Specter files, full logs. Morrison checked his ammo. We've got one chance to make it out. There's a patrol boat at the end of the pier if we can reach it. He stopped. Rachel followed his gaze. Volkov, standing at the far end of the pier, illuminated by the flames behind him. He was smiling. "How many times," he called out, "do you need to kill me before you realize you're just writing my story for me?" Rachel raised her rifle. "Last chapter." He laughed. "You think this ends with me? Look around you. The world's already running on Specter. It's in your command chain, your satellites, your funding channels. Kill me and you kill a messenger." "Then I'll start with you," she said. He stepped closer, unarmed, fearless. "You and I aren't so different. We both serve ghosts. We both make peace with blood." Morrison whispered, "Rachel." She steadied her aim. Volkov kept walking. "You think you can stop what you built. You think you're the hero here." Her finger tightened. He raised his hands. "Do it, become me." The shot broke the air. He staggered, but Rachel hadn't fired. Behind her, Nora stood frozen, smoking pistol in hand. Volkov looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, then back at Rachel and smiled again. "Told you," he whispered, collapsing. Rachel turned, staring at Nora. "Why?" Nora's breath came fast. "He was going to shoot you." "No," Rachel said softly, "he was." Morrison swore under his breath. "We need to go, now." They sprinted for the pier. Gunfire followed, Volkov's men pouring out of the shadows. Rachel covered their retreat, reloading on instinct. Each flash of her rifle lit the rain like lightning. When they reached the boat, Nora jumped in first, clutching the hard drive. Morrison climbed in next, starting the engine. Rachel turned for one last look. Volkov's body lay motionless, the flames reflecting off the blood around him. But even as she watched, one of his hands twitched. She almost fired again, but something stopped her. Instead, she whispered, "Let the dead bury the dead." Then she jumped aboard. The boat tore away from the pier, waves breaking against its hull. Behind them, the port burned, the data, the men, the ghosts. All of it swallowed by flame. Hours later, they drifted in open sea, the horizon beginning to pale. Nora sat silent, staring at the hard drive in her hands. Morrison leaned against the railing, bleeding from a graze on his arm. "We need to get this to someone we can trust." Rachel looked out toward the rising sun. "Trust is extinct." He studied her. "Then what now?" She didn't answer right away. The ocean stretched endless, indifferent. Finally she said, "We leak it, all of it. No agencies, no flags, just truth." Morrison nodded slowly. "That'll burn a lot of people." "Good," she said. "Let them feel the heat for once." Nora looked up, eyes full of conflict. "Rachel, you said killing men like Volkov only writes sequels. What does truth do?" Rachel met her gaze. "It ends stories before they start." But as the sun rose higher, painting the sea gold, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. The hard drive. She leaned closer, studying its surface. A faint red light blinked, one she hadn't noticed before. Morrison frowned. "What is that?" Rachel's stomach dropped. "It's not a drive," she whispered. "It's a beacon." Before she could move, the device chirped once, and the boat's comms flared to life. A familiar voice crackled through the static. "You didn't really think ghosts could outrun their maker, did you?" Rachel froze. Volkov's voice. "Alive." Her eyes met Morrison's. He cloned himself, specters running his identity. The ocean around them suddenly felt infinite and alive. Because the real enemy wasn't a man anymore. It was the system she helped create. When does a ghost stop being a soldier and start being an idea? Rachel stared at the blinking red light on the hard drive. Each pulse felt like a heartbeat, not hers, but something bigger, colder. Specter. The system she helped design. The one that could replicate orders, mimic command, build an army without a single human conscience. Morrison stood at the console near the helm, face pale in the early light. "He's alive," he muttered. "You heard his voice." Rachel shook her head. "No, we heard his code." Nora looked up from the floor, still clutching her headset. "You mean Volkov isn't alive?" Rachel exhaled slowly. "Not anymore, but Specter doesn't need him to be. It learned him. Every decision, every tone, every command pattern. The AI became him." Morrison rubbed his temple. "So what, we're fighting a ghost made by a ghost?" Rachel nodded. "Exactly." They sat in silence for a long time, the boat rocking gently under the weight of the impossible. Finally Morrison said, "What do we do?" Rachel's eyes lifted toward the horizon, a thin gold line cutting through the sea. "We finish what we started." They beached the boat at a deserted inlet 2 hours later. Waves crashed softly against the rocks. Beyond the shore stood an old communications tower, half buried in vines and rust. Rachel recognized it immediately. Cold War relay hub, still has uplink capabilities if we rewire it. Nora blinked. "We're going to upload Specter's data." "Not to the agencies," Rachel said, "to the world." Morrison stared. "You're talking full exposure. Every black op, every kill order, every classified breach." Rachel's tone didn't waver. "Specter survives in the dark. We drag it into the light." He hesitated. "You'll burn every bridge you've ever walked across." She looked at him. "That's the point." They spent the next hour setting up the uplink. Nora worked the terminal, patching wires, rerouting power. Morrison guarded the perimeter, scanning the cliffs for movement. Rachel stood by the tower base, watching the horizon. The wind had picked up, restless, alive. She could feel the storm coming. And deep inside, she knew Specter wasn't going to let them go quietly. The radio crackled once. "You always had a talent for dramatics." Rachel froze. The voice, Volkov's, came from their comms channel. "Did you really think killing my body would end me? You built the architecture, Ghost 7. I just gave it a face." Rachel pressed her mic. "You're nothing but lines of code now." "Code doesn't bleed," the voice replied, "but it kills faster." Morrison swore under his breath. "He's breached our network." Nora typed furiously, trying to lock him out. "Don't bother," the voice said. "You're part of me now, all of you." And then silence. The console went black. Nora gasped. "He just wiped our system." Rachel stepped forward, steady. "Then we go analog." They stripped the drives, rerouted through the tower's old manual transmitters. Static hissed like ghosts whispering through the wires. Rachel adjusted the frequency. "If we can amplify the signal through the coastal array, it'll bounce off NATO's satellites, untraceable once it leaves atmosphere." Nora looked doubtful. "And how do we make sure it gets there before Specter blocks it?" Rachel checked her watch. "By being faster than the machine." Morrison's voice was low. "You really think this will stop it?" "No," she said quietly, "but it'll make sure it's never forgotten." The storm rolled in fast. Wind screamed through the tower scaffolding, rain hammering metal. Lightning ripped across the horizon like veins of light. The transmitter crackled to life. Nora shouted over the wind, "We're live." Rachel grabbed the hard drive. "Then let's end it." She slotted it into the relay port. The tower lights surged, power screaming through circuits that hadn't been used in decades. The system fought back immediately, feedback pulses, code interference. Specter trying to corrupt its own exposure. Rachel's hands moved faster. Manual overrides, signal boosts, counter-frequency loops. Morrison fired toward the cliffs as drones appeared in the distance, red lights slicing through the rain. "Company," he yelled. "Keep them off us," Rachel shouted back. He fired again, dropping the first drone. Sparks rained down into the surf. Nora clung to the terminal, trying to keep the upload stable. It's fighting us. Rachel's fingers bled from stripped cables. Let it fight, that means it's scared. Lightning flashed again, and for a moment in that blinding white, Rachel saw him. Volkov. Not flesh and blood, projection. His image flickered across the storm, his face rendered by Specter through the tower's signal interference. You can't kill what the world needs, his voice boomed. Chaos demands a conductor. Rachel stared up at the ghost she'd created. Then I'll cut the wires. She ripped the mainline feed, rerouting the power surge directly through the uplink. The relay screamed, metal groaning under the overload. Rachel, Morrison shouted, "It's going to blow." She didn't stop. "Get Nora out." "No," Nora cried. "Now." Morrison grabbed the younger woman, dragging her toward the shore as the tower crackled, lightning grounding through it in jagged arcs. Rachel stayed, hands on the controls, eyes fixed on the storm. Specter's voice thundered, "You'll die for nothing." She whispered back, "Then I die as myself." She hit the final command key. The uplink overloaded, a blinding surge of white and sound. And then everything went dark. When Rachel opened her eyes, the world was gray and wet. She lay at the base of the tower, smoke curling from the wreckage. The rain had softened to a mist. Her ears rang, her hands were burned. But the relay was silent. Nora ran toward her, tears mixing with rain. "Rachel, oh my God." Rachel tried to sit up. "Did it send?" Nora nodded, breathless. "Yes, it's everywhere. The files, the names, the proof, all of it, it's out." Morrison appeared, rifle slung, limping from a cut on his leg. "Whole world's going to wake up pissed tomorrow." Rachel smiled weakly. "Good, maybe they'll finally stop sleeping." She looked up at the sky, dawn bleeding through storm clouds. "You know what they'll call it?" "What?" Morrison asked. "The day the ghosts came clean." By the time reinforcements arrived, the tower was nothing but smoke and memory. Rachel sat wrapped in a blanket near the fire they'd built from broken pallets. Nora slept against her shoulder, exhausted. Morrison stared into the flames, silent. A radio crackled nearby, global news feeds already echoing what they'd done. Leaked files reveal decades of covert manipulation. Global AI network exposed. Anonymous whistleblower known only as Ghost 7. Rachel listened, expression unreadable. Morrison turned to her. "You know they'll come for you." "They'll come for all of us," she said, "but they won't find us." He frowned. "Where will you go?" She looked toward the sea. "Somewhere quiet, maybe teach again, maybe forget." He studied her for a long time. "You won't forget." "No," she admitted, "but maybe I'll stop remembering." Weeks later, the world burned, not with bombs but with questions. Governments denied, commanders resigned, systems collapsed under the weight of exposure. Specter's code was erased from every known database, or so they said. Rachel disappeared again. No one knew where, not even Morrison, not even Nora. But sometimes on encrypted channels, strange messages appeared, coordinates, warnings, photos of operations that hadn't even happened yet. Signed only with 2 words, "Ghost active." Months passed. One evening, on a small island off the coast of Greece, a woman sat at a cafe overlooking the sea. Sunlight caught the scar along her wrist, a reminder of old storms. She wore civilian clothes, sunglasses, her hair shorter now. The waiter brought her coffee. "American?" he asked. "Used to be," she said softly. He smiled and left her alone. Across the harbor, children played near the water, laughing. The world kept spinning. Rachel watched them, expression distant but warm. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small battered device, a radio receiver. Static, then a faint voice through the crackle. Specter signal fragment detected, source unknown. She closed her eyes. Some wars don't end, They just whisper less loudly. She set the radio down, took a sip of coffee, and whispered to herself, "Let the world handle its own ghosts for a while." Later, as the sun sank into the Aegean, a local fisherman spotted something glinting in the surf, a piece of twisted metal with a serial number stamped in faded paint. G701. He tossed it aside, thinking it scrap. But if he'd looked closer, he might have seen the faint engraving on the back, words nearly worn away by time and sea. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.